He said those words. He laughed. That dismissive tone still rings in my head when I sign multi-million-dollar contracts. He thought my salary defined my worth. He thought me stepping out of his shadow was stupidity. I know exactly what he craves: status, power, and the validation of other men. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I just looked at him and saw a man who was completely replaceable. I'm not just taking his assets, I'm taking the one thing he truly loves, and I will hire him. Or at least, I'll decide if he's still worth hiring. My name is Anya Vance. The coq au vin I'd spent 4 hours preparing had congealed into a greasy, lukewarm stew. It was our 5th wedding anniversary, and Trent Halstead was 3 hours late. When the front door finally clicked open, I didn't look up from the kitchen island. I just listened to the sounds of him, the heavy sigh as he dropped his briefcase, the click of his phone unlocking, the complete absence of an apology. He walked into the kitchen, his eyes glued to the glowing screen, his tie already loosened. He didn't look at the table I'd set. He didn't look at the food. He didn't look at me. "I'm leaving Meridian Dynamics," I said, my voice cutting through the silence of the cavernous room. That got his attention. He looked up, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. "What did you say?" "I'm quitting," I repeated, stacking the unused anniversary plates. "I'm starting my own company, a consulting firm." He stared at me for a solid, unblinking second. Then he threw his head back and laughed. It wasn't a warm laugh. It was a sharp, barking sound that bounced off the stainless steel appliances, a sound of pure, unadulterated ridicule. "A company," he scoffed, finally pocketing his phone. "Anya, what is this? Some kind of cute little financial adventure? Are you bored?" "It's not an adventure, Trent. It's a business plan." "A business plan." He leaned against the counter, crossing his arms, adopting the posture he used in boardrooms when he was about to gut someone. "Let's talk about business, then. You make, what, $120,000 a year at Meridian. It's respectable, for your field." He paused, letting the insult hang in the air. "When I am officially named vice president at Crestwood Capital next quarter," he continued, his voice dropping into that low, arrogant cadence he loved, "my base salary will be $1.5 million. That doesn't include the bonus structure. You want to throw away your perfectly good salary right when I am about to solidify our future?" He shook his head, a smirk playing on his lips. "This is irresponsible, Anya. It's the behavior of a dependent woman who doesn't understand how real money is made. You don't have what it takes to play at this level." He looked at me, really looked at me then, as if I were a line item on a budget he was about to cut. "You will never, ever reach my level." And there it was. It wasn't the lateness. It wasn't even the laugh. It was that statement. I realized this contempt wasn't new. It wasn't a momentary lapse caused by a long day at the office. This was a core belief. This was how he saw me. He measured human value in dollars and in his ledger. I was permanently in the red. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. The suffocating knot of hurt I'd been carrying for years suddenly didn't dissolve. It crystallized. It became something cold, sharp, and perfectly, terrifyingly clear. I didn't see my husband. I saw an opponent. My mind flashed back a decade, to our tiny, damp apartment near campus. I remembered working 2 jobs, one at the library, one waiting tables while he networked. I remembered taking the money from my academic scholarship, the money meant for my future, and using it to pay for his tailored suits and his club membership dues. I paid for the foundation of the very career he was now using to bludgeon me. I turned my back to him. I picked up the cold, heavy plates from the dining table. I scraped the expensive food into the garbage disposal. He watched me, confused by my silence, expecting the fight I always used to give him. I saved the wine for last, a complex, heavy red, his favorite, the bottle he'd specifically requested for our anniversary. I walked to the sink, pulled the cork, and, holding his gaze, I tipped the bottle. I poured every last drop down the drain. The dark red liquid swirled and disappeared, a perfect metaphor for the last 5 years of my life. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded. I placed the empty bottle gently in the recycling bin. I didn't answer. I walked past him, out of the kitchen and up the stairs. I didn't turn toward our bedroom. I went straight to the guest room at the end of the hall. I opened the closet and began moving my clothes from his world into mine. He wanted me to be silent. He wanted me to understand my place. He wanted me to stop chasing him. Fine. I would stop chasing him. I would stop talking. This was the beginning of perfect compliance. The alarm went off at 6 a.m., just like always. I got up. Trent did not stir. I went downstairs. The French press, the one I had bought because he insisted he preferred the taste, sat clean and empty on the counter. I measured out the dark roast beans, boiled the water, and filled a single travel mug. For me. I took a yogurt from the refrigerator and ate it standing at the kitchen island, the same spot where he had laughed at me less than 12 hours before, at 6:45. I heard him moving around upstairs. At 7 o'clock on the dot, he came down, his suit immaculate, his hair damp from the shower, his face puffy and confused. He walked to the counter, looked at the empty coffee pot, then at the full mug in my hand. "You didn't make coffee?" he asked. The entitlement in his voice was thick, automatic. "I did," I said, taking a sip. "For myself." I watched him. The man who confidently managed multi-billion-dollar asset portfolios looked utterly baffled by the simple mechanics of a coffee machine. He fumbled with the grinder, spilling beans onto the white quartz countertop. He opened the wrong cupboard 3 times looking for the filters I always kept stocked. "Anya, I'm going to be late," he snapped, finally abandoning the effort. "That sounds like a personal problem," I said. I rinsed my spoon, placed it in the dishwasher, picked up my laptop bag, and walked out the front door, leaving him standing in the kitchen, coffeeless, staring at the mess he had made. The silence in the house, once I officially submitted my resignation at Meridian Dynamics, was vast and productive. I did a quick calculation. I had just reclaimed roughly 30 hours a week. 30 hours that had previously been dedicated to the unpaid, full-time job of managing Trent Halstead. 30 hours spent scheduling his social calendar, managing his dry cleaning, remembering his partner's birthdays, selecting his ties, and soothing his massive, fragile ego after bad days at the office. I poured all of that reclaimed energy, all that meticulous, wasted planning, into the business plan for Apex Strategy Group. My first meeting was not with an investor or a client. It was with Evelyn Shaw. Evelyn was a legend in Sterling City. She was the divorce lawyer the wives of high-finance husbands hired when they decided to fight back. Her office was a glass-walled fortress overlooking the very financial district Trent believed he owned. She wore a severe black suit, no makeup, and had a handshake that felt like it could crush stone. I sat across from her, did not cry, and did not bother with accusations of his suspected affairs. I simply stated the facts. I told her about our 5th anniversary, the cold dinner, and his exact words. "He told me I make $120,000, I said, my voice steady, "and that I will never, ever reach his level." Evelyn steepled her fingers, a thin, satisfied smile playing on her lips. "Good," she said, her voice dry. "Arrogance is astonishingly expensive in a divorce. Mr. Halstead just does not know he is paying for it yet." Her advice was cold, precise, and brilliant. "You are not a victim asking for alimony, Anya. You are an investor demanding a return. You paid for the suits he wore to get his foot in the door at Crestwood. You paid the rent with 2 jobs while he networked. Your scholarship money funded his image. We are going to present a bill for services rendered. Go home, find the bank statements, find the receipts, find the emails. We are going to use his own definition of value as the primary lever to dismantle him." I left her office energized. I formed Apex Strategy Group as an LLC, specializing in what I knew best: executive-level human resources. But I had a niche. I was a headhunter, a poacher. My target list was a mirror image of Crestwood Capital's main competitors. I was going to disrupt his rivals, build my reputation, and then I would aim directly at him. The first practical step was opening a new business account at a bank he had no relationship with. The second was the slow, methodical transfer of funds. $200 here, $500 there. Small, insignificant amounts disguised as household expenses or groceries from the joint account he never monitored. It was not stealing. It was my back pay. I was building a war chest, a financial safety net completely firewalled from his control. The final piece of motivation arrived 2 weeks later. I was cleaning out my old Meridian email account, preparing to shut it down forever, when I found a message from 6 months prior. It was from an old colleague. The email was breezy. Had drinks with Trent last week. He's killing it. He mentioned you guys were struggling. He actually called your marriage a strategic mistake from his early days. Said he was going to correct the portfolio once the VP promotion was finalized. Brutal. Man. Hope you guys are okay. I read it 3 times. Strategic mistake. Correct the portfolio. He was not just insulting me. He was planning to liquidate me. The rage was so cold, so pure. It was almost clarifying. He had just handed me the weapon and the motive. That night, I bought a new, hardbound ledger. I opened it to the first page. October 12th, 11:15 p.m. Arrived home 3 hours late for anniversary. Stated I would never reach his level. Laughed at business plan. I began documenting everything. Every late night. Every time he used the word dependent. Every dismissive, belittling comment. I was not writing a diary. I was building a legal case. Brick by agonizing brick. I went through my phone. Every shared social connection. Every friend who was really his colleague. Every wife of a Crestwood partner I had been forced to entertain. I deleted them. I did not block them. I just erased their existence from my life. I reactivated my old university connections, contacted mentors from my early days at Meridian who had genuinely respected my work, and reconnected with people who had no ties to the toxic, insular world of Sterling City finance. My old life was being archived. My new one was being built. Trent, oblivious, was still complaining that he could not find his favorite brand of coffee filters. He thought he had won the argument. He had no idea he had just started a war he was already losing. I officially registered Apex Strategy Group using a trade name, a sterile, forgettable corporate entity that had no legal connection to Anya Vance. I was not just building a company, I was building an avatar. I leased a small, nondescript office in a shared workspace downtown, far from the gleaming towers of the financial district. My strategy was surgical. I started by targeting the periphery of Trent's world. I took on the difficult contracts, the ones established firms avoided. I poached mid-level data scientists for tech startups and found compliance officers for venture capital funds that were in direct competition with Crestwood's client base. My reputation in human resources from Meridian Dynamics gave me an opening, and my new, hungry approach gave me results. I was building a portfolio, case by case, proving that Apex could deliver, but I could not do it alone, and I could not be the one making the calls. I needed a face, a frontman. I needed Carter Dunn. Carter was a senior colleague I had trusted implicitly at Meridian, a brilliant, overlooked executive with twice my experience and half the recognition. He had been passed over for a promotion one too many times and was quietly looking for an exit. I met him for coffee. I did not offer him a job. I offered him a partnership. I'm building something, Carter, I told him, sliding the business plan across the table. I need a chief operating officer. I need someone to be the public face, the voice on the phone, the name on the press release. I will handle the strategy, the data, and the targeting. You will handle the execution. He read the proposal, his eyes scanning the aggressive growth projections. He looked up at me. This is ambitious. Anya, you're aiming at some very big players. I know exactly where their weaknesses are, I said. I just need someone they'll listen to. He signed on 2 days later. While Carter was making Apex's first official calls, the silence in our home deepened. The intricate scaffolding of domestic support I had maintained for 5 years was gone. Trent began to notice. "Anya, where are my gray wool trousers?" he called out one morning, his voice tight with irritation. "I have no idea." "Trent," I answered from the guest room, not looking up from my laptop. "The cleaners were supposed to come on Tuesday. I must have forgotten to schedule them," I said. He stormed out, wearing a slightly wrinkled suit, grabbing a stale bagel from the counter. A week later, he missed a dentist appointment, the one I had scheduled for him 6 months in advance and always reminded him about the day before. He was annoyed, visibly frustrated by the sudden incompetence of his world, but his pride was a fortress. He would not, could not, lower himself to ask me to resume my duties. He had demanded silence and separation. He was getting it. His silent frustration was a low-frequency hum in the background of my real work. And then, the first major opportunity landed. Carter forwarded me an email. It was from Horizon Financial. My heart hammered. Horizon had just lost their largest institutional partner, a $10 billion account to Crestwood Capital. It was Trent's biggest win of the year, the victory he was riding to his vice president promotion. And now, Horizon was desperate. They needed a new chief risk officer, and they needed one yesterday. They were hemorrhaging credibility, and they were willing to pay an obscene premium to the firm that could plug the hole. "This is our moment," I told Carter over a secure line. "They're not just hiring a person, they're making a statement. I know exactly who to find." That night, I sat in the guest room, which I now called my office, and I listened. Trent was in his study down the hall, pacing, his voice booming through the closed door. He was on a conference call, bragging about the Horizon deal. "They never saw it coming," he boasted, his voice slick with self-congratulation. "Their entire risk model was outdated. Their CRO was an idiot, completely asleep at the wheel. We didn't just steal their client, we exposed their incompetence," I typed, my fingers flying. I wasn't just hearing his ego, I was getting a direct, unvarnished analysis of my new client's primary weakness, straight from the mouth of their chief competitor. I knew precisely what kind of candidate Horizon needed because Trent had just told me. He was, unwittingly, drafting my job description. But I knew my old HR experience was not enough. Trent lived in the world of financial modeling and risk derivatives, a language designed to exclude people like me. So, I enrolled in night classes, 3 nights a week. I sat in a university lecture hall, learning about quantitative risk analysis, financial derivatives, and portfolio management. I was not just learning to talk his talk. I was learning to think his thoughts, to understand the very weapons he used to define his superiority. The final step was the wall. Trent still had my personal number, my personal email. He had not used them, but they were a vulnerability, a link to the past I was incinerating. I went to a different carrier. I bought a new phone, a new number. I created a new, encrypted email address. The only people who had this new contact information were Carter Dunn and Evelyn Shaw. I left my old phone on the guest room nightstand, plugged in, fully charged. It was a digital ghost, a beacon for a man who would never think to look for me. The web was spun. The first thread was taut, and Trent was still just complaining that he had no clean shirts. It took 48 hours. From the moment Carter Dunn made the first exploratory call to Michael Anders, Crestwood Capital's senior CRO, to the moment a signed 9-page offer letter from Horizon Financial was countersigned and returned. We did not just offer him more money, though the figure was staggering. We offered him validation. We used the exact dismissive intel Trent had been feeding me for months. "Horizon values data-driven analysis," Carter told him, a line I had written myself. "They do not believe a gut instinct supersedes quantitative modeling. They are looking for a leader, not a rubber stamp." Michael Anders resigned from Crestwood Capital via email at 7:58 a.m. on a Thursday, effective immediately. The news hit the Sterling City Financial Wire by 9 a.m. It was not just a poach, it was a strategic defection, a senior risk officer, the brain behind Trent's biggest accounts, leaving the winning firm for the firm they had just publicly humiliated. It sent a tremor through the market. It suggested Horizon was not only recovering but aggressively fighting back. It suggested Crestwood, the impenetrable fortress, was vulnerable. And because Michael Anders was the lead risk analyst on the very project Trent was using to justify his VP promotion, Trent was the first one to take the hit. He came home that night well after 11, smelling of whiskey and rage. He did not just drop his briefcase, he threw it against the foyer wall, the impact echoing through the silent house. I was in the guest room, my door open, studying a textbook on derivatives. They poached him, he snarled from the doorway. He did not enter. I looked up, feigning mild, sleepy confusion. Poached who? Trent. Anders Michael Anders. My CRO, just gone, walked right out the door and straight to Horizon. Horizon. Can you believe the audacity? He was pacing the hallway, his hands clenching and unclenching. That's terrible, I said, underlining a paragraph. It's unethical, he spat. It's these parasitic headhunters, this new firm, Apex Strategy, whoever they are destabilizing the market. They don't build anything, Anya. They just steal. They're vultures, and they aimed right at my team. I let the irony hang in the air. The woman, he said, understood nothing about his world, had just delivered the most significant blow to his career he had ever experienced. Well, you'll have to replace him, I said simply. That sounds stressful. He stopped pacing. He stared at me. His eyes narrowed. He was desperate, and his desperation was momentarily stronger than his pride. He needed the one thing he had always ridiculed, my soft HR skills. The internal pool is thin, he admitted, rubbing his temples. We have no one ready to step up. I have to look outside, and I have to do it fast. I allowed myself a small pause, as if considering it. Well, I said, closing my textbook. You know I've screened thousands of executive profiles. If you want a second pair of eyes on any CVs, I'd be happy to look them over, just to check for red flags, stability issues. It's the least I can do. He hated it. I could see the muscle jump in his jaw. He hated needing me, but he nodded. Fine. Yes. I'll have my assistant send over the initial candidate list tomorrow. The next day, my old dormant email account, the one he still associated with Anya Vance, the dependent, received 5 encrypted high-level resumes. He thought I was screening for his replacement. I was screening for my next victim. I analyzed their career trajectories, their compensation gaps, their previous employers. He had not sent me a candidate pool. He had sent me a vulnerability assessment of his entire department. He had given me a menu. The stress of the defection must have made him realize how fragile his entire support system had become. That weekend, he tried to breach the silence. He found me at the kitchen island, mapping out my next move on a legal pad. Anya, he said, his voice attempting a softness that sounded unnatural and rusty. Listen, I know I've been under a lot of pressure. This whole VP campaign is a beast. It's all I can think about. I continued writing. I'm sure it is. And I know I was harsh, he said, stumbling over the words. About your new, your project, your company. I shouldn't have laughed. It was wrong. It was a pathetic, transparent maneuver. He was not apologizing for what he believed. He was apologizing because his world was spinning out of control and he needed his domestic servant back. I finally looked up, my expression neutral, polite, professional. I appreciate you saying that, Trent, but it's fine. I'm just respecting the boundaries you put in place. You made it very clear you wanted distance, and that we weren't operating on the same level. I understand that. I'm focusing on my work, and you're focusing on yours. It's working. His face tightened. My calm, logical acceptance of his own terms was the last thing he wanted. He wanted tears. He wanted a fight. He wanted absolution. He was getting none of it. Right, he said, his voice turning cold again. Fine. He turned and walked away. The next day, I got a call on my new, secure phone. It was Evelyn Shaw. "Anya, a small heads up," she said, her voice all business. "My source inside Crestwood's legal department just told me they're in a full-blown panic. They aren't just running background checks on new hires. They're running deep-dive security checks on all senior staff. They think they have a leaker. They think Anders's defection was an inside job." A cold thrill went through me. They were tearing themselves apart, looking for a traitor in their ranks. They were looking for a man. They would never think to look at the wife. "They're right," I said. "It was an inside job, just not the one they're looking for." "Just be careful," she warned. "Don't let them trace anything back to you before we've filed." I hung up and pulled out the Crestwood personnel files Trent had so foolishly sent me. I spread them across the table. They were hunting for a leaker. I was hunting for a leader. And there he was, Mason Reed. Director of Portfolio Management. He was brilliant, ruthlessly ambitious, and the only other person at Crestwood seriously considered to be in the running for Trent's VP slot. Trent despised him and viewed him as a direct threat. He complained constantly that Mason was all data, no killer instinct. Mason was target B. Poaching him would not just be another client fee for Apex strategy. It would be a direct, catastrophic blow to Trent's ascent. I was not just stealing his staff anymore. I was about to steal his rival, and in doing so, clear the board. Carter and I built the Mason Reed file with the precision of forensic accountants. This was not a simple poach. This was an extraction. Mason was Trent's equal in intellect, but his opposite in temperament. Where Trent operated on ego and aggression, Mason was a creature of pure data. He was patient, methodical, and, as Trent's own complaints had revealed, deeply, quietly resentful. Trent ignores his predictive models half the time. I told Carter over our secure line. He steals the credit when Mason is right and blames Mason's lack of instinct when the market shifts. Mason isn't just underpaid, he's undervalued. That's our lever. We documented 3 specific high-profile projects from the last 18 months where Mason's models had predicted an outcome. Trent had overruled him, and then later claimed Mason's data merely supported his own gut decision. I could not approach Mason. Apex Strategy was already a boogeyman in the Crestwood offices. So I went through my old network, back to my Meridian days, and found a former mentor who now ran an exclusive high-level analytics think tank. I asked her to host a private, invitation-only roundtable on predictive modeling in volatile markets. Mason was invited not as a job applicant, but as a keynote speaker. I attended as Anya, an independent HR consultant working with the think tank. I sat in the back. During the open-floor discussion, I raised my hand. "A question for Mr. Reed," I said, my voice calm and professional. "Given the accuracy of the models you've presented, what is the best strategy for data scientists when they are faced with instinct-driven leadership? How do you protect the integrity of the data when the executive team is more interested in crafting a narrative than following the numbers?" The room went quiet. I had just articulated the exact frustration he lived with every single day. Mason looked at me, his eyes sharp. He didn't know who I was, but he knew I understood. "The data is the integrity," he said, his voice clipped. "Those who ignore it, however senior, eventually become a liability." The seed was planted. Carter Dunn called him 2 days later, not as a headhunter, but as a fellow professional who had heard about his insightful comments at the round table. While Carter was carefully, slowly setting the hook, Trent, panicked by the vacuum left by Michael Anders and the growing instability in his department, cornered me in the kitchen. He looked haggard, his suit less crisp, his confidence visibly frayed. "Anya," he said, the word forced. "You're good with people, HR stuff. I need your advice." I had to physically clench my fists to keep from laughing out loud. I turned from the sink, composing my face into a mask of neutral concern. "What's the problem?" "It's Mason Reed, my top portfolio director." He lowered his voice. as if the imported Italian marble countertops might be listening. He's vital to the VP transition. Absolutely vital. And he's flighty. I can feel it. How do I lock him down? What do you people do? Just throw money at him? I almost pitied him. Almost. Money is just a painkiller. Trent, I said, reciting the HR platitudes I used to give him. It doesn't buy loyalty, especially not from someone like Mason. A high performer like that, he doesn't want to be paid. He wants to be valued. Does his team respect him? Does his leadership implement his analysis? Or is he just a calculator for someone else's big ideas? He winced, the truth of it hitting him. So what do I do? You're in finance? I said. He doesn't want a raise. He wants equity. He wants a title that reflects his actual contribution. He wants power. He wants to know that when he runs the numbers, the man at the top will actually listen. Trent absorbed this, his expression grim. Equity. A new title. Right. He nodded, already strategizing his countermove, and walked back to his office. He had no idea he had just given me the precise, non-negotiable terms of my offer. I immediately called Carter. Trent is going to offer him a bigger title and some phantom stock. We have to blow it out of the water, offer him full partnership, a guaranteed percentage of the new fund he'll be managing at Horizon. And the title of Chief Investment Officer, give him the absolute authority Trent is terrified to share. That Friday, Trent came home drunk, not just his usual 2 scotches and an ego trip, but stumbling, tie-askew drunk. He slumped onto the living room sofa, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. They're gutting me, Anya. He slurred, his voice thick with a pathetic self-pity. I stood in the doorway, watching the man who controlled billions of dollars dissolve. This new firm, this apex strategy, they're parasites. They're just taking everyone. He rubbed his face, his voice cracking. They're stealing the soul of Crestwood. They took Anders, and now I know they're talking to Mason. I can feel him pulling away. That's awful, I said, my voice empty of all emotion. It's not awful. It's targeted, he muttered. It's like they know me. It's like they know exactly where to cut. They're ruining my shot. Anya, they're ruining my promotion. They're ruining everything. I watched him, the great Trent Halstead, reduced to a whining mess, confessing his deepest professional fears to the one person responsible for them. I let him lie there. I walked back to my room, past the guest room, and into my new home office. I closed the door. I did not open the Apex files. I opened the spreadsheet for Evelyn Shaw. I pulled up the mortgage documents for our house. I started a new file, documenting every financial contribution I had made, the $115,000 down payment from my Meridian signing bonus, the $82,000 from my inheritance that paid for the kitchen renovation, the $40,000 I'd used from my own savings to cover the property taxes 2 years ago when Trent had a minor cash flow problem. He was right. Someone was stealing. But while he was passed out, complaining about losing his soul, I was quietly, methodically documenting why I was going to keep his house. Mason Reed accepted Apex Strategies' offer on a Tuesday afternoon. The text from Carter was succinct done, effective immediately. I felt no celebration, only a deep, cold satisfaction. The fallout at Crestwood Capital was not mere chaos. It was a full-scale implosion. Losing the CRO was a hit to their stability. Losing Mason, the director of portfolio management, was a direct attack on Trent's credibility. Mason was his supposed right-hand man, the clear number 2 for the VP slot. The internal memo circulating at Crestwood, which Evelyn's team quickly acquired, stated that Trent's promotion was now under review, pending a full internal investigation into his team management. The Trent that came home that week was a ruin. The impeccably tailored suits hung on a slumping frame. He suffered from severe insomnia, and the drinking became daily, starting the moment he walked through the door. The image of the rising star, The man who was building our future had cracked and was crumbling before my eyes. Then came the performance. He arrived home one evening holding a pathetic, crumpled bouquet of grocery store roses, the kind I detested. He cleared the papers from the dining table, lit the wrong scented candle, and tried to set a scene. "Anya," he said, his voice straining for sincerity, "I've been a fool. I see that now." I agreed to the dinner. I knew this wasn't about our marriage. It was about the stability of his image. A successful, stable man does not get divorced right before a major promotion. He needs his wife to provide the illusion of control. "I've realized my mistake," he continued, holding my hand across the table, his palms sweaty and cold. "The stress, the VP pressure, it made me short-sighted. I want to heal this. For us. For our future." "Our future," I repeated, my tone carefully neutral. "Tell me about the vice president contract. Trent, are the equity clauses still tied to the long-term health of your department?" He blinked, thrown by the clinical shift in conversation. "Yes, but what does that matter now?" "It matters because if they're reviewing your status, your entire financial projection changes," I noted. "It also makes your position highly vulnerable to further poaching. Does Crestwood have a non-solicitation clause that protects against internal employee recruitment?" I watched the facade of romance evaporate, replaced by sheer professional panic. He realized I wasn't there as his wife. I was a highly paid consultant analyzing his career breakdown. His attempt at reconciliation was utterly devoid of real love. It was a desperate attempt to stabilize his personal life to secure his professional benefit. It was a transaction. I had come prepared. Evelyn had insisted. Sewn into the lining of my dress was a tiny, high-quality voice recorder. When the conversation shifted back to the apology, I encouraged him. "Tell me what you regretted saying the most." "Trent." He took the bait. "The things I said about your job, about your financial contributions. I didn't mean any of it. But if we separate now, Anya, it will ruin me. The board will see it as a failure of leadership, a lack of judgment. It will destroy my professional image." I kept him talking, his vague admissions of guilt and his implied threat that a divorce would damage his career more than mine, all perfectly captured. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place the next morning. While Trent was in the shower, I checked his laptop, which he had carelessly left open on the kitchen counter. I wasn't looking for Apex mentions. I was looking for the strategic mistake evidence. I found it. A 6-month-old email chain with a junior analyst named Clara. Flirtatious, then intimate, then suddenly cold. The thread ended a month before his sudden, panicked return to healing the marriage. Clara had left Crestwood 2 weeks ago, citing stress and lack of opportunity. He hadn't come back to me because he loved me. He came back because his mistress, likely weary of the same ego and contempt he offered me, had dumped him, and his personal life had become as unstable as his department. The attempt at reconciliation was pure triage. That was the line. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the evidence of his cheap betrayal, and felt nothing but the deep, satisfying click of the last lock falling into place. I walked to the guest room and called Evelyn. "I have the full recording, and I have confirmation of infidelity tied directly to the timeline of his career failure. It's time. Evelyn, file the paperwork. Today." "Excellent," she said, without surprise. "We'll file under grounds of marital misconduct and emotional abandonment. This shifts the leverage entirely." I hung up the phone. The summer of cracks was over. It was time for the final, definitive split. The email arrived at noon. Subject line Internal Status Review Project 44. It was copied to Trent and his superior. The language was sterile, but the meaning was clear due to repeated, unmitigated personnel losses. Trent was formally placed under internal supervision. His promotion window had been reduced to 48 hours. He had to fill Mason Reed's critical role immediately, or his VP opportunity would be reassigned. Trent, now operating on sheer adrenaline and panic, did the only thing he knew. He outsourced the problem. His executive assistant, clearly under duress, called every major headhunting firm in Sterling City, demanding an emergency placement. The call finally landed on Carter Dunn's desk at Apex Strategy Group. Carter called me immediately. He's desperate. Anya. He said price is no object. He just needs someone who looks good on paper now. Take the meeting, I instructed. Tell him Apex is dedicated to excellence and we pride ourselves on speed. And tell him our emergency surcharge is 30% above our standard rate. He needs to bleed a little. Carter closed the deal within the hour. The contract was massive. The irony was intoxicating. Trent was paying my company an exorbitant fee to help him solve the crisis that my company had created. I personally curated the candidate slate. I found Arthur Hayes, a brilliant, highly credentialed quantitative analyst who had just been laid off from a failed hedge fund. Arthur was textbook overqualified, known for being ruthlessly arrogant, and incapable of taking direction from anyone he deemed his intellectual inferior. He was, in short, everything Trent disliked in a subordinate. Carter presented Arthur as the best-in-class immediate impact solution. Trent, drowning in internal pressure, didn't bother with due diligence. He scheduled the interview for the following morning. Just make sure he knows how much this costs. Carter. Trent complained in an angry email that Carter forwarded to me. I don't know how these firms justify these fees. I drafted the response, which Carter sent. It was professionally polite, but carried a veiled threat. Mr. Halstead, at Apex Strategy. Our value is in our process. We only place candidates of real value, not those who rely solely on inflated titles or past affiliations. Our methodology ensures long-term viability. It was a perfect double-edged knife. It flattered his desperation for a high-value hire while subtly reminding him that his value was currently based on a title he hadn't secured. The interview was a disaster, exactly as planned. Arthur Hayes, secure in the knowledge that he was Trent's last hope, let slip a crucial detail. I actually had a solid offer from Meridian just last week, Arthur mentioned casually, but Apex convinced me that Crestwood was the better move. They said that while Meridian's pay structure was superior, their leadership was more stable. Apex suggested Crestwood was experiencing some critical high-level leadership issues that might open up opportunities faster. Trent went rigid. The internal security breach he had been warned about had just been confirmed, not by a leaker, but by the recruiting firm he had hired, a recruiting firm that was systematically dismantling his team. He ended the interview abruptly, his face pale with fury. He immediately called Carter, screaming that Apex was unethical and sabotaging his firm. I need to speak to the founder. Trent barked into the phone. This is not a business issue. This is a personal attack. Who the hell is running this company? Carter, feigning confusion, simply replied, I'm sorry, Mr. Halstead. Our founder remains strictly anonymous to protect their competitive edge. My policy is firm. Trent hung up, convinced that some faceless rival VP was funding a campaign to destroy him. He was looking everywhere except the guest room where his wife was packing, while Trent was tearing apart his office searching for a corporate phantom. I was closing my own deal. I finalized the lease on a sleek, luxury one-bedroom apartment on the north side of the city 20 minutes from the financial district, $2,000 more than Trent would have ever approved, and completely outside the geographic orbit of his familiar roots. I transferred my documents, my few cherished possessions, and my war chest of finances into my new, secure world. By midnight, my guest room was empty. The house still looked exactly the same, Trent's clothes still in the master closet, his car in the garage, but the woman who had managed it was gone. I was ready. The next time Trent saw me, I would not be his wife, his consultant, or his co-signer. I would be his enemy. The Sterling City Annual Charitable Trust Gala was more than a fundraiser. It was a ritual of power, a place where the VP title was unofficially decided. Trent had to attend. He was desperate to project competence, to show the Crestwood board that his recent personnel challenges were merely minor bumps. He was dressed in a pristine tuxedo, polished, But underneath, I knew he was brittle. I arrived precisely 45 minutes after the red carpet frenzy died down. I was wearing a structured charcoal gown that was conservative enough for the venue but cut with an undeniable, sharp authority. My entrance was not spectacular. It was strategic. I walked in with Carter Dunn on my right and Mason Reed, the man who had defected 2 weeks prior, on my left. Trent saw me across the crowded ballroom. The glass of champagne stopped halfway to his lips. His entire body froze. I wasn't just there. I was walking with his 2 biggest professional disasters. I ignored him entirely. I let Carter and Mason usher me over to a small cluster of reporters from the local financial news. Trent watched in disbelief as Anya Vance, the woman whose greatest social achievement used to be ordering the correct wine for his partners, spoke confidently about disruptive talent acquisition and reframing the value proposition of human capital. He finally forced himself to move, circulating among the Crestwood partners, but his eyes kept flicking back to me. He watched Mason and Carter interact with me not as equals, but with genuine, unsolicited respect. The subtle shift in power was an arrow right through his professional armor. Then came the performance I had planned for. I steered Carter and Mason toward the main bar, intentionally positioning myself within earshot of Trent, who was talking with the chairman of Crestwood's compensation committee. "I'm telling you!" "Mason!" I said loudly, my voice projecting across the polished marble. Oh, the leakage in the portfolio department was a systemic failure of leadership. The way Crestwood handled your compensation review, that was a massive structural blind spot. It shows they prioritize outdated seniority models over actual data integrity. Mason, playing his part perfectly, nodded gravely. I was getting the distinct sense that my contributions were not truly valued at a senior level. Apex gave me the authority to match my analysis. Trent's eyes were laser beams, burning into the back of my head. The chairman's gaze flickered between Trent's strained face and my composed one. Trent was trapped. He couldn't explode in front of the committee, but the public discussion of his failure was torturing him. The final hammer blow was delivered by an unwitting accomplice, a colleague of Trent's, a man named Jeremy who had been recruited by Apex last week for a hedge fund in Chicago. Spotted me. Jeremy was known for his social awkwardness and lack of filtration. He approached Trent, oblivious to the atmosphere, eager to share his professional update. "Trent, good to see you. I was just talking to Anya. Amazing woman. She's really shaking up the industry. Isn't she?" Trent blinked. "Excuse me." Jeremy beamed, gesturing toward me. "Yes, Anya, our strategic director. She's why I took the job at North Star. She presented a clear path forward that Crestwood simply didn't offer. Truly brilliant." The air went out of the room. Trent's face went from pale to ghostly. Anya, strategic director, Apex strategy. He finally saw the whole picture. The strategic mistake was not marrying me, it was dismissing me. It was the realization that the parasitic headhunter firm that had systematically gutted his team, jeopardized his promotion, and caused a panic among the board was not some anonymous rival. It was the woman he had laughed at for making $120,000 a year. Trent moved. He moved fast, shedding his professional composure like a snake shedding its skin. He stalked toward me, elbowing past 2 donors, his eyes blazing with shock, betrayal, and total panic. He grabbed my arm with a crushing grip. "We need to talk, now, in private." His voice was a low, desperate hiss. I did not move. His grip on my arm was painful, but I was beyond caring about physical discomfort. I simply looked at him, directly into his terrified, desperate eyes, and shook my head once. "There's nothing to talk about." "Trent," I said, my voice low but clear enough to carry over the polite hum of the gala crowd. "Not privately." He tried to drag me toward a secluded corner. I pulled my arm free, smooth and decisive. His mask was beginning to slip. The polished executive was dissolving into a panicked, grasping man. I reached into the small, beaded clutch I carried and withdrew a single, thick, pale blue envelope. It was heavy bond paper, formal and utterly uncompromising. I placed it gently but firmly onto his open palm. His eyes darted down to the envelope. The single, stark line printed across the center read, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." "You laughed when I said I quit my job," I said. My voice was calm, almost conversational, but every word was measured. A calculated strike. "Now, I'm making sure you have no job left to quit." I took a deep breath. Apex Strategy Group is my company. I own it, and I run it. I used the inside knowledge you so carelessly gave me your arrogance, your professional weak spots, your inability to value subordinates to build it. Every one of your top defections was a direct result of my strategy. The chairman of Crestwood's compensation committee, standing nearby, suddenly seemed very interested in his champagne glass. Trent's face was a study in pure horror. "Just yesterday," I continued, raising my voice slightly, ensuring a small, influential circle of people could hear, "I officially submitted a recruitment proposal to a senior Crestwood partner. I am aiming to replace the VP role you are currently begging for." He exploded, dropping the envelope onto the pristine white carpet. "This is unethical. This is a malicious, targeted attack to destroy my career. Anya, and I will sue you for everything you have." I smiled then, a cold, empty gesture. "Destroy your career." "No, Trent, I'm just exposing the rot you built it on." I looked him straight in the eye and recited a line from the email he had written years ago to his mentor, the one I had accidentally found but never forgotten. "You once said I was a desperate little puppy only worth $120,000 a year. That was your measure of me. My firm is billing you at a rate 10 times that just to clean up your mess." Just then, Evelyn Shaw appeared, materializing perfectly from the crowd like a sharp, elegant ghost. She put her hand lightly on my shoulder. "Mr. Halstead," Evelyn's voice was like ice water. "I am Ms. Vance's counsel, due to the evidence of marital misconduct, emotional abandonment, and your recorded psychological abuse. Ms. Vance is entitled to a highly favorable settlement. This includes a claim against a percentage of the future earnings from the vice presidency you are currently vying for, as our legal team contributed substantially to the efforts that secured that potential income." Trent stumbled backward. "You can't. I'll use Crestwood's lawyers. They'll bury you." I laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Oh, Trent, my lawyer already has copies of your internal supervision status memo. She knows you're already fighting your own board for incompetence. You can't use Crestwood to fight me, because I know all the ways Crestwood is already fighting you." I squeezed Evelyn's hand. Carter and Mason quickly formed a subtle human shield around me. "Good night, Trent," I said, giving him one last final look of utter dismissal. I turned on my heel and walked away, leaving him standing there in the middle of the crowded room, his perfectly tailored suit ruined by the shame of the dropped blue envelope and the piercing, professional glare of every important partner at Crestwood. A few days after the gala, I invited Trent to my new office, not the temporary shared space, but the official Apex Strategy Group headquarters, a full-floor suite in the newest tower downtown. The view was deliberately curated a panoramic sweep of the financial district, with the dull, gray spire of Crestwood Capital directly in the sightline of my executive desk. Trent arrived alone. The arrogance that had been his defining feature for a decade was gone, replaced by the deep exhaustion of a man who had not slept, whose carefully constructed world had imploded. His shoulders were slumped, and his tie was loose. He looked small. He did not wait for me to speak. He launched immediately into pleas. "Anya, please, you have to withdraw the petition," he said, his voice husky and desperate. "Or at least let Evelyn agree to a quiet, minimal financial settlement. This isn't just about money. It's about my image. Crestwood, the board, they're looking for any reason to cut me loose." I did not invite him to sit down. I remained standing behind my massive, clean desk, adopting the posture of a CEO addressing a struggling vendor. "I understand your position, Mr. Halstead," I said, my voice low and devoid of warmth. I was not his wife. I was the chief executive of the company that was currently orchestrating his professional demise. I laid out the facts, point by point. "You fundamentally misunderstood my intelligence and my ability to build networks simply because my paycheck was smaller than yours. You saw my effort, the 2 jobs, the support, the networking for your career as evidence of my dependency, not my competence. That was your catastrophic mistake. You measured my value by my salary when I was busy building my authority." He opened his mouth to protest. I cut him off. I reached into the leather folder on my desk and pulled out a single sheet of paper, a standard Apex employment contract template. But it wasn't for him. It was for the vice president position at Crestwood Capital, the one he had officially been denied yesterday following the internal review. "I am currently recruiting for this role," I stated, placing the contract squarely on the desk. He stared at the title, the paper shaking slightly in his hand. "And I can tell you the most critical metric on our scorecard for this placement," I continued. "It's not projected asset growth or tenure. It's stable leadership and genuine respect for subordinates. Things you have proven you fundamentally lack." I looked him in the eye, finally delivering the climax of this long, silent war. "I quit my job. Trent," I said, my voice hard and absolute. "And now, Apex strategy will decide whether men like you are still worthy of being granted power. And the answer for you is no." I pushed a thin stack of papers across the desk. It was the candidate shortlist for the Crestwood VP position. He recognized the names. Former peers Trent had fired, brilliant analysts he had openly mocked, ambitious women he had systematically held back. "You said I was not in your league," I finished. A cold declaration. "You're right, Trent. My league is building. Yours is collapsing. The divorce petition stands, and it will not be contested. That is my best and final offer." He realized he hadn't just lost a wife. He had lost his professional identity, his status, and the very ground he stood on, all at the hands of the woman he had ridiculed. I pressed the intercom button. "Security, please escort Mr. Halstead out." As the heavy oak doors closed behind him, I turned back to the window. The sun was pouring over Sterling City, illuminating the top of the Crestwood Tower. I looked out at the financial world, no longer as the overlooked wife in the shadow of a big shot, but as the architect of my own empire. From now on, I decided the rules of the game. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Let me know where you're tuning in from down in the comments to connect and share your thoughts. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit the hype button so more people can hear my truth.